I object to the original request.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Utah.
Mr. President, I've been asked by a couple of my colleagues why it is that I couldn't just have the good sense to let their amendment go through. I say let's do it. Let's have it right now. I support the amendment. Let's vote on it right now. Let's vote on Senator Moran's amendment right now. Let's vote on mine right now. Now, the comparison has been made by my friend from South Carolina that because he didn't get his vote, because someone objected this morning to his amendment dealing with the Export-Import Bank, that I should also have my amendment blocked. Now, it's important to realize the Export-Import Bank was not created by a previous iteration of the National Defense Authorization Act. The provision that I'm objecting to here, the provision that I'm trying to address with my amendment here, was in fact created by a previous iteration of the National Defense Authorization Act. It was passed in 2011 with, I believe, far too little consideration, without the American people being aware of what they were doing. And it remains on the books to this day. The next argument made by my friend from South Carolina is an interesting one, which is that this needs more of an airing. It needs more of a hearing. He's promised me now a hearing on a Judiciary Committee which he chairs. Much as I appreciate that gesture, that isn't enough. Let me replay a couple of things. First of all, I've been working on this for 5 years. I got a vote on it 4 years ago. 67 senators, in fact, voted for it. It was removed in a conference committee. Some have said there was some confusion about why it was removed in a conference committee, but regardless, it was removed. Been trying ever since then, in subsequent iterations of the Defense Authorization Act, to get another vote on it. I serve on the Armed Services Committee, and I was told by the chairman, my distinguished colleague, the senior senator from Arizona, last year. I told him I wanted to bring it up in committee. He said, you can't bring it up in committee because there's a jurisdictional issue with the Judiciary Committee. He said, that's better dealt with on the floor. I said, okay, I'll deal with it on the floor. We got to the floor. I was blocked from offering it on the floor. It didn't happen. So this year, I was told you can't bring it up in committee. There's a jurisdictional issue. You're best served waiting for the floor for that. I said, okay, I'll wait for the floor. I brought it up again this year. Now I've been told by the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, the senior senator from Arizona, that we'll deal with it next year. I've been told by the senator from South Carolina that he'll deal with it at some unknown point in the future in a hearing, not a markup, just a hearing in a subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee, which he chairs. So we're talking about an issue now that was brought about 5 years ago, and I'm being told again and again to wait more. Well, this is an issue that got the vote of 67 members of our body 4 years ago. This is an issue that was brought about by a previous iteration of the National Defense Authorization Act. This is the appropriate vehicle in which to address this. Now, Mr. President, this is not a frivolity. This is not just some nicety. This is not just some parochial interest. This is a basic human rights interest. This is an interest that relates to some of the most fundamental protections in the United States Constitution. When you say that you want to lock up American citizens detained on U.S. soil without charge, without trial, without access to a jury, indefinitely for an unlimited period of time, you are implicating at a minimum the Fourth, the Fifth, the Sixth, and the Eighth Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. These are very significant. And so if, as my friend from South Carolina says, that we just need to take a deep breath and deal with this another day, why does the status quo, which is insulting to the history, the tradition, the text, the context of the U.S. Constitution, why should that be the status quo? Why, Mr. President, should we wait to deal with this? Why, Mr. President, should the status quo be one that is insulting to the American people, one that is insulting to the descendants of those Japanese Americans who were interned in World War II, indefinitely without charge, without access to trial, without access to the jury system, without access to their fundamental rights under the Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and Eighth Amendments to the Constitution, among others? Why should that status quo prevail? Why, moreover, should someone who is concerned about these issues, these fundamental human rights issues, these fundamental constitutional rights issues, why should someone who is concerned about those be maligned and accused of not caring about individuals who would be harmed about the non-passage of another amendment? Why should that person be blamed when that person, me, is willing to allow a vote on the Shaheen Amendment, on the Moran Amendment, as long as they give me a vote on my amendment, an amendment that was allowed a vote 4 years ago, an amendment that received 67 votes, a veto-proof supermajority, only 4 years ago. So, having been told again and again and again, wait until next year, wait until next year, wait until the next committee process, wait until the next floor process, after a while, one begins to discern a pattern. That's a pattern that I'm discerning. There's another pattern that I discern, which is a pattern in which when you allow government to exercise a certain power, even if it might not be being exercised at the moment, eventually it will. That's why we put precautionary language within our laws. That's why we have rights in our laws. What are rights, after all? But statements of law that restrict action by the government. As Madison noted in Federalist 51, government is a reflection of human nature. To understand government, you have to understand human nature. If men were angels, we'd have no need of a government. And if government could be administered by angels, we'd have no need for these external constraints on government, on its ability to exercise power. But we've learned through sad experience, Mr. President, that when human beings get power, when they get excessive power, sometimes they abuse that power. So we have to constrain it. And it's important that we decide that we're going to constrain it before the moment arrives, lest we see another Korematsu moment, lest we see the internment of more American citizens without charge, without trial, on an indefinite basis, on the basis of mere accusations, accusations unproven, accusations untested by a jury. Mr. President, the whole reason for having a Constitution rests on this understanding, this fundamental understanding that when government power grows, when it expands, it does so at the expense of individual freedom, and it sometimes does so at great risk to the human soul, at great risk to the ability of an individual to remain free. I'm all in favor of the Shaheen Amendment. I'm all in favor of the Moran Amendment. Let's have a vote on those two amendments and on the amendment that I've proposed, an amendment that is limited, an amendment, I should note here, that would not foreclose the ability of this body down the road to identify the changed circumstances of the sort that some of my colleagues have referred to. It simply says that if the government is going to do this, there has to be a plain statement, a clear statement. It has to do so expressly. The Congress must expressly authorize this kind of action, either in a declaration of war or in an authorization for the use of military force. I don't think that's too much to ask, especially given the types of constitutional protections we're dealing with. If, in fact, we're going to call the American homeland, if, in fact, we're going to call the territorial jurisdiction of the United States of America part of the battlefield, ought we not have a declaration of war, an authorization for the use of military force that identifies it as such? I mean, after all, the precedents that we're talking about, the precedents upon which this theory is based, are premised on this idea that you have enemy combatants that become part of an enemy's fighting force, as was the case in Ex parte Curran, where you had American citizens going over to Germany, putting on a German uniform, fighting for the Germans. That was part of that war. They were enemy combatants on the battlefield. Ex parte Milligan, where you had Confederate rebel soldiers who were enemy combatants on the battlefield, fighting against the United States. So if we're going to do that, we need a declaration of war. We need an authorization for the use of military force that states so expressly. And that is the sole purpose of my amendment, and I don't think that's unreasonable. And in fact, I think that is necessary. So I'd like to get this done. I'd like to get this done today. We can get this done today. Let's have votes on all three amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Senator from Arizona.
I guess finally, I woke up in the middle of the night last night thinking about this issue, and it made me think of a long time ago when I saw a lot of brave Americans die, some of it in aerial combat. Several times I thought that perhaps I could have prevented their deaths by being a better airman or taking certain actions. And it bothers me to this day. I can't imagine how it must bother someone who is literally signing the death warrants of some people who, in their innocence, decided they would help the United States of America. I couldn't bear that burden, and I believe that what we're doing here by blocking this amendment to allow these wonderful people, as described by all of our leaders, to leave a place where death is almost certain, at least in the case of some of them, that because of some exercise that would have no immediate effect, that we're blocking this ability to save lives, I do not understand. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Hi everybody, my name is Mike. This is my YouTube page, Mox News. Okay, so if you want to see the full Mike Lee, John McCain, Lindsey Graham butting heads, it's available at the alternate Mox News YouTube page. There's a clickable link in the text body of the video. Right below this video, there's a little box that says alternate Mox News YouTube page. Click here. Do that. That video is over there. Go subscribe to that page. It'll be an excellent idea. I just needed to respond to John McCain here for a second. He's saying because Mike Lee is standing up to try and demand that the American people get their constitutional rights instead of being able to be shipped off to some secret black site prison and no one know what happened to them. Nobody be told what happened to them. No charges filed on them. No day in court. No, you get to see a judge. They just ship you away and nobody knows what happened to you. No lawyers, no nothing. That's what Mike Lee is fighting against. John McCain is fighting for. John McCain is saying, oh, if you don't let this thing go through, if you don't let us vote on my amendment, then people are going to die. Well, it's not Mike Lee that's stopping it from happening. It's you saying you can't vote, you can't debate Mike Lee's amendment. You can't debate whether or not Americans should have the right to get a day in court and hear their side of the story before they get shipped off to some secret prison. Okay? Mike Lee says, Senator Lee says, if you allow a vote on my amendment, then I'll be more than happy to support both your amendments. I want to vote for your amendments, but you won't allow anyone to vote on my amendment. So it's really John McCain and Lindsey Graham who's doing this game playing, saying, oh, people are going to die. It's more blood on your hands, John McCain. More blood on your hands, Lindsey Graham. Don't act like, oh, I'm sorry. Ugh. Fuck you, McCain. You know, this and the stuff where he talks about, oh, you know, soldiers that I knew that I might have been able to do a better job protecting. You know, a lot of people think he's responsible for a fire on an aircraft carrier in which more than 100 sailors died. More than 100 soldiers died on the aircraft carrier because of John McCain. Hundreds more were injured, and John McCain was one of the very first people removed from that aircraft carrier for his safety, and he wasn't injured at all. John McCain doesn't give a fuck about anybody that's not going to pay him millions of dollars, so we're clear. Anyways, I thought that should be pointed out because it's a bunch of bullshit. I thought it was a good video for you to see. If you want to see the full video, it's available at Alternate Mox News YouTube page. There's a clickable link in the text body of the video. Right below this video, clickable link, Alternate Mox News YouTube page. Click on it, go over there, subscribe now. Thanks very much for tuning in. My name's Mike. This is my YouTube page, Mox News. Stay cool. One of these days, this war is going to end.